Lawman's Kiwi Voice. We have got Matt King from Democracy NZ, friend of the show by this stage, joining us. Thanks for taking the time to hang out and have another yarn, Matt. Appreciate it.
Evening, Lucas. Lovely to be here and lovely to see you going from strength to strength.
Appreciate it. We're doing our best. Got freezing cold out in the weather today, attempting to get some weather chat going. So that was interesting, something different. We'll wait for a couple more people to get on there, but the theme of this evening, team, is, look, we've been covering a bit of what's been going, well, a lot of what's been going on over in the Netherlands, Sri Lanka, keeping an eye on India, all these places that are having large-scale protests against government regulation on agriculture is the simple way to put it. Obviously, there's a bit more complexity to that. Matt, obviously being a farmer and a politician and having his ear to the ground, as it were, with people, and has a deeper understanding of SNA policy, etc., what that means for New Zealand. So we've got a few on, Matt. We should probably dive into it. Usual Kiwi Voice stuff, it'll grow, and people will watch this after we've posted as well.
Sure.
So what do you think, firstly, what do you think about what's been going on over in Holland?
Look, you know what you see the coverage that's being given to the massive protests over in Europe, massive protests, yes. and yet a lot of crickets with the mainstream media here, a lot of crickets, and it's just a continuation of what they've done for the last 2 years, really. These real serious things happening around the world, and the Dutch farmers are joining with the French farmers and with the German farmers and with basically Europe, and they're out on the road, they're in the towns, they're protesting, and they're very unhappy with what's going on. And I liken it to the Dutch truckers, not the Canadian truckers, you know.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
They've had enough. People have had enough of government intrusion and interference in their lives, and trying to enforce stupid regulations and take basic human rights away. So it's a real concern, Lucas, a real concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't aware. I mean, I knew they were bordering onto Germany there, and they were getting a bit of support there. So you're saying France has joined in as well? You've heard that?
Yeah. There's been protests all over the world, but the European, the Dutch is obviously the big ones of the Dutch. I mean, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of bits of machinery and tens of thousands of people. Huge, big protests, like we've seen the aerial footage of it. Mostly on citizen journalism like yourself. In fact, I would say that some of the coverage that you've been providing over the last few weeks beats the hell out of the mainstream media, because you're actually just covering, giving a bit of what you might call a balanced coverage, so you're covering. Yeah,
appreciate that. Dutch is my homeland in terms of got relatives over there. My grandparents came over in the war, or escaped from there during the war, came to Southland. So I'm technically 50%. I've got quite an interest in it. So I guess the bonus of independent media, Matt, is that we get to go into detail. I did a 10-minute vid on just that. So it's nice to be able to do that. I guess if I was working for a large corporation, such as Stuff or Herald or whatever, I wouldn't be able to do so. But I appreciate your comments. It's obviously a government, as you say, government overreach, specifically around agriculture regulation, and just buying so heavily into that green ideology, trying to remove all nitrogen in a real hurry, which there's all sorts of questions and debates, open debates that could be had about that. How do you relate that back to, well, I see a link, so tell me what you think around relating that back to what's happening in New Zealand with the regulations against farmers. That's obviously spawned groundswell and others. What are your thoughts on this, the SNA policy, that sort of thing?
Okay, well, I'll just touch on one thing. I interviewed the groundswell representative for agricultural emissions, Steve Cranston, and he's a pretty knowledgeable sort of a bloke. And he basically said to me that the government are making these state up the emissions from farmers and how they want to see us decrease our emissions. But when we ask them for the evidence, for the modelling, for the actual numbers, the actual data that they're using to tell us that we're apparently these gross polluters, just under 50% of the New Zealand's emissions, apparently. They cannot provide it, and they have not provided it, and they will not provide it. And the suggestion there is that if they're not providing that information, they just don't have it. Because if they've got it and it's so compelling, of course they would provide it. So my argument to this for farmers is to say, push back and say, if the government is saying that we're gross emitters, and then we want to see the modelling, and I say to you, if you don't count the sequestration of carbon from all the grass and the trees on my farm, then how can the model be accurate? How can it be representative of my true emissions? I would even hazard a guess to say that my farm might be carbon neutral. The amount of carbon being recycled through my grass and trees stays in the cycle with the cow, and is consumed and emitted, and then it's cyclic. So they might find that I might be a net carbon zero, if not a carbon sink. And if I'm a carbon sink, the government would have to pay me, and that's never going to happen. So I say,
well, they like to spend.
What's that?
Oh, they might. They like to spend.
Yeah. True. So I would say, give us the data, give us the modelling, convince us that we're these bad people that are polluting the planet. And then the second thing I would say is, if we're the most efficient producers of food in the world, and we produce for 40 million people overseas, we feed 40 million people overseas, and we're the most efficient producers. The only tool in the toolbox at the moment, realistic toolbox tool, is lowering production. And if we lower production, a less efficient producer will fill the gap overseas, and the total emissions go up. Now, you can't argue with that. That's a fact. So if we drop our production to lower our emissions, it's just virtue signaling, which will cripple our economy. So I say to all farmers out there, demand the modelling, demand the data, prove to us, government, James Shaw, prove to us that what we're doing is so bad for the country and for the planet, and we'll take it from there. We'll go from there. So that's one thing. But SNAs, Lucas, SNAs.
Yes.
I got given this aerial map from the council of my farm. This is months ago now, and probably a third to a half of my farm has bush on it. You know, I quite like my bush. You know, it's shelter for the stock, and it's doing good things. You know. So, and I like a bit of bush, and they considered all the areas of my farm that had some bush or even gorse as an SNA, significant natural area. And when you read the data on it, it said that theoretically we'd pay all the rates on it, but we'll lose control and power over what we do on that, and that's a massive land rights grab, and that's an invasion of my rights, erosion of my rights, and I push back on that big time. I say, how dare they? How dare they?
Yeah. So essentially, does it mean that when they designate it as an SNA, if that was to all go through, then that means you own it on paper only. So you can't develop it, you can't farm it.
Yes. Well, the moment they get control, as in they designate it an SNA, and it becomes a designation and it becomes the law, then they can just add and change the law as they go, and remove rights and take away and require things from landowners. The sky's the limit. So the minute we give that up, that right, then we've lost the war. And so I say, most farmers in Northland, actually a lot of the farms around Northland, the farmers themselves are naturally into preserving and conserving and protecting. That's what they do. So we've probably got more bush now than we had maybe 30, 40 years ago, because farmers are fencing off bush, as I have, and are protecting areas and recognizing the steep stuff needs bush on it, and planting things out. So we did that without any legislation or regulation or bullying from the government. So I say to people, Lucas, I say to farmers, push back on that big time. This government are intruding on our lives like never before, and we have to say we're not going to put up with it, and we're not going to tolerate it. And if you do it, we're going to kick you out at the next election.
Yeah. So the idea behind the SNA policy. So is it for reduction in carbon emissions, designating an area that SNA status, or is it for something else biodiversity wise? Like, I'm just trying to struggle to get my head around it. Like, if if you've got bushland, that's obviously, like you say, it's going to suck up carbon more likely. So what's the thinking from their end in terms of trying to take control of it by stopping you from doing what you want with it?
Well, I think the one of the drivers will be to protect areas that do have significance, and there are places around the country, where there's lovely rock formations and where there's really unique features where most people would agree, let's try and protect that. Let's compensate the farmer and let's protect that. And I mean, on my farm here we have Kiwi 2, which is a bit of area of farm that we effectively signed our rights away to by saying that we would always protect it, and we still own it and we still pay the rates on it, but we'll never develop it, and it's steep hills and cliffs anyway. So we've done that already. But I resent the idea that this government can come in, or the council and via the government can come in and just blanket designate an area out on my farm and my land, my neighbour's land, and just take our rights away like that. I feel quite strongly about it. And up north here we had massive protests. We had everyone turning out, big marches and huge numbers of locals, and it was fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, well, that sort of clears things up a little bit more for me. It's just another government control thing. I mean, the thing that concerned me when I initially heard about some of this policy is, again, looking back to what's going on in the Netherlands. I mean, they're dealing with, obviously, it's been going on for 3 or 4 years since I've discovered that the Dutch government's been pushing so hard. They're going to the extent of, as you say, reducing production by buying pig farms and shutting them down, so their pork supply, bacon supply is cut right off. So I was more concerned that that's outside of the SNAs then, which it sounds like it's not going to have that sort of direct effect in terms of supply. Some of the other regulations, the stuff that Groundswell's been speaking up against, etc. Do you understand that, firstly, and does that sort of lead us towards some of those more radical attempts by government to reduce emissions?
Well, absolutely, and I look at what just in the last, not this current parliamentary term, but the last one, there was legislation put through the House which effectively said that if you were buying land to plant in pine trees, you could get rubber stamped through the Overseas Investment Commission process, which is designed to make sure that if you're an overseas investor and you come into this country, you add value to the land, and it's quite a rigorous process, and it's to stop people coming in and buying up land and then just carte blanche what they like. And well, effectively, because of New Zealand First and their connection with the foresters, they changed the law and made it so that overseas investors and owners can come in, buy big tracts of New Zealand farmland, and then plant it in pine trees and basically rubber stamp through. And you couldn't do it if you're going to do a sheep and beef farm, or you're going to do a horticultural, or you're going to grow grapes, or you're going to do some fantastic development. You had to still go through the process. But if you said, I'm going to put pine trees on it, you're good to go. And what that's doing now with the carbon credits is meaning that beef and dairy dry stock farmers cannot compete with the per hectare price that a forester can buy the land for, because they're getting, not only are they getting potentially the value of the wood, which is what it should only be, the value of the wood, but they're getting carbon credits, which are some, carbon credits. I mean, they can be like the share market all over the place.
Yes.
And so we're seeing large chunks of farmland that should never, ever be in pine trees being bought up and planted in pine trees. And that kills rural New Zealand. It kills our productive land. We don't have huge tracts of really productive land in New Zealand. It's a myth. We have a lot of country which is marginal, right? Our productive land, our good land, we don't, as a percentage of the overall country, almost the biggest percentage is dockland. So to think that pine trees are going to be planted in our good, I mean, I'm a dry stock farmer. I could make 2 to 3 times the income, if not more, if I planted my hill country farm in pine trees. That will never happen. I will never do that. But,
yeah, that's almost, that's a whole different thing again. I had this inkling of how that the pine planting thing was going. So that's interesting to hear. That. So would you say that's probably closer to home? That's more of our immediate threat, that initial policy, along with other strict regulations that are coming in terms of the effect on our New Zealand's food supply.
Absolutely, because when you planted farm and pine trees, say you got a big station, and it might have a head shepherd, and it might have a fencer, and it have a farm stock. They'll have 3 or 4 people, depending on the size of the farm. They'll have 3 or 4 people supported on that farm, and their families going to the local schools. Everything. And then you plant it in pine trees, and apart from a little surge of activity when they come in and plant them, there'll be nothing happening on that farm for years and years and years. Some pruning, and then that's it. Nothing for years. And all that employment and all that the lifeblood of rural communities gone. And we've seen it happen in the past, decades gone past. We've seen it happen all over the country. This is not new. We know this is going to happen. So, and money talks. If you've got a farm and you can make 3 times the income by having some guys come in and plant trees and lease it off you, I don't blame farmers for selling their farms. I don't, but it's just not the way. It's false, and it's wrong.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, that clarifies that. The other thing we wanted to touch on tonight, Matt, is Three Waters. Obviously, the New Zealand Taxpayers Union have completed their roadshow. I think you attended some up that way. What are your thoughts on the success of that? Obviously, your own feelings around Three Waters, and how we're going and fighting that asset grab.
Look, it's a no-brainer. It's madness to support Three Waters. It's a con. It's a fraud. They never campaigned on it. If they'd campaigned on it, I don't think they would have won the election, because if they had have said what they're planning to do, and actually, I'll go a step further. If they were honest on what they're actually planning to do, because it follows the boundaries of these Three Waters boundaries follow along iwi boundaries. That you've got to say to yourself, what in what world do you think that can work, and is it fair? And it's like you say, a massive asset grab. But people are wise to it. The Taxpayers Union going around the country doing that roadshow was fantastic. They've let everyone know now. Everyone knows, and the government can't slip it under the radar now, because it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got the thing for me about Three Waters, and you might want to comment on this, is that the opposition to it from the New Zealand public in all forms, all surveys, all councils, 64 out of 67 councils, I think it is. I throw that number out there a lot. I hope I've got that right. Oppose it. So what's the go? Why are they continuing to push it through?
You could speculate on what's going on in the Labour government. Are the Maori caucus running the show? Are there strong personalities there that have an agenda? I mean, we're speculating here. We don't know. But what we do know is they didn't campaign on it. They kept it hidden from everyone. And that sort of behaviour in itself, people need to let them know at the ballot box that sort of behaviour is unacceptable. If you're going to do something as massive as Three Waters or co-governance or any of that, then let's have a referendum in the form of an election where you mandate that you run on it. It's a mandate. You get the mandate if you get voted in, or a referendum, or even just a whole lot of publicity saying this is what we plan to do, and get some feedback. And they did none of that. They just they're a sneaky, corrupt government. They are of the worst kind. And I would say, Lucas, the worst government that this country has ever seen, for a number of reasons.
Yep, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, we don't want to just jump on a big hate train, but I do agree with you. I've had some interest in politics most of my adult life, since I voted since I was 18, but deep in it now, and it's because they are what I see as the worst government that we have had, at least in my life. So, hey, look, well, let's move on to something slightly more positive to close things off. What is going on with Democracy NZ? What have you got coming up? What's happening there?
We got some fantastic news, Lucas. Some fantastic news. Now you're talking my language. You're talking what I want to talk about. We're just about to register the party, so we've got 550 members.
Sweet.
We all signed up, paid up. We're just doing the final touches on the constitution, which you have to have when you submit to register. We've protected all our logos and names and that sort of thing. So we're doing everything properly. We're doing it. We're taking our time and doing it properly, so that when we get to the election, we've done all the groundwork. We've prepared everything, and everything's in place so we can hit the ground running. Because at the next election, if we're fortunate enough to get the support of, a good chunk of New Zealand, we have to be ready to go, hit the ground running at the election, and get a solid, foundation of a government together, one that's going to be stable, one that's going to look after all Kiwis, and get our economy back on track. Because at the moment, I would say we're in a crisis situation in terms of everything we do. So on the bright side, I'm around the country, and I'm tomorrow night I'm talking to a crew, having a public meeting in Taipa at the Barn, which is just out of the Taipa township on the east coast there, in beautiful north of the Bay of Islands. So that's tomorrow night. Tuesday, I'm heading to New Plymouth. We've got a fairly full crowd there at the. Actually, I've got it down here at the New Plymouth Club, 6:30. Wednesday, nice. Sorry.
Said nice.
Yeah. And then Wednesday, 20th July, 6:30, Palmerston North. Thursday, 21 July, 7 p.m. at the Harbourside Function Centre in Wellington. Then on the way back, we're at Bullabure in Whanganui at 6:30 p.m. So that's next week's schedule. And then the following week, we're in Tauranga, we're in Thames, we're in Whakatane. So she's full on, Lucas. But what I'm finding when I'm out there talking to people is very, very common themes of concern. Really passionate people. Really, I'm meeting some lovely people. I'm really meeting some really grassroots people, much like yourself, mate. Much like yourself.
Appreciate it.
That care about our country and want to choose a different path. So, I appreciate you getting me on here, and I want to see you and what you're doing going from strength to strength.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's definitely, we've definitely continued on growth. We had flatter periods, and then the numbers continue to go up in terms of followers, but we're not losing anyone. It's just a steady incline as we cram in as much alternative media coverage as we can between the day job and family and all that stuff. But I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. We've got the best followers in the world. They're fans of yours as well. So I really appreciate your time, Matt. It did give me more of an understanding of SNAs in terms of the policy, what it means, and good to get your thoughts on what's going on over in Holland. Keep an eye on Kiwi Voice yourself. I know you do. We're going to cover more of that as it comes about. It's been awesome. We'll get you on again, of course, as the need arises. Friend of the show, as I say now. Appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out.
Good on you.
Awesome. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks, matey. Catch up.
Yeah.